inspire other people. A community that changes lives for the better.
Today is a great day filled with great opportunities. However, a lot of people, sooner or later, they will realize the impact on inflation, as the inflation has actually been rising rapidly. And this can actually be followed by, a global depression. So imagine, you were paying your house, or your bond actually went from 5,000 to 8,000. So a 2 million house that actually costs around about 11.8 in maybe November 2021. Imagine today it's over 20,000 a month. So where will you get the extra 8.2 to save is your bond, right? So on the other side, the salaries are actually increasing 1% to 6% annually. It means the cost of living is generally getting more expensive and expensive for people, right? So we saw what actually happened with your cooking oil. So according to my analysis, and by the way, before I talk about my analysis, I saw this on Twitter last night that someone was complaining about changing the ways. Now they have to change the way of living, because now they have to balance, right? So imagine, according to my analysis, I always say, if the economy keeps on doing this, most people will actually be forced to lose their cars. They'll be forced to actually, lose their houses as well. Because mathematically, guys, it's just so impossible to hedge the inflation with only a job, without a side hustle, right? So in recent weeks, we saw that the banks runs and the banks were collapsing, especially in USA. That was actually proof enough that banks and financial institutions, they're not big enough to actually fail, right? So on the radio last week, if maybe you had on radio, people were saying, they were forced to change the way, the living, the way they're eating, the way they were, let's say, for example, if you were used to eat a meat, now you don't eat a meat anymore. Some are saying they even fast a week. So it's actually showing you that things have actually changed rapidly. So now the question is, how actually can we hedge against the inflation, right? How can we make sure that we are inflation proof? Is it Bitcoin? Some people say Bitcoin is a good hedge fund. Is it gold? Because some people say gold is also, a good hedge fund for a long period of time. So, is it a side hustle? Is it a side hustle? Right? So, because you can actually hedge this inflation with a side hustle, by the way. So ask me how, and I'll tell you that. So in my opinion, guys, South Africa is a developing country. It's not yet a developed country, because now we also try to sync economically with the economics like from USA economy. But USA is also facing its own inflation problems as well. So as long as the USA is increasing interest rate, it's not likely that they will decrease it yet, right? So in my thoughts, if this inflation is not actually dealt with accordingly, this can actually lead to a recession, so global depression. So there is still ongoing escalating wars, Russia and Ukraine, they haven't actually came to a conclusion. In my opinion, I would say, guys, it's going to get worse. So has possibility of spreading in other countries? Yes, they can actually spread in other countries as well, right? Because now we've seen there's a fight against the currencies, right? So one country wants to be the leader for all currencies. So and we've seen recently BRICS countries are actually going to announce the new currency, guys, that can actually challenge the dollar. So during the pandemic, remember, they printed a lot of money. And once they printed that a lot of money, remember, we were locked down, right? We couldn't go out and spend all that money, right? So now what happened? Obviously, it's about supply and demand, right? During the lockdown, we couldn't actually buy a lot of things like your iPhones, a lot of things. So now the economy was just down. The economy was not running at that time, right? You can imagine now they printed a lot of money. People have money in their houses, and we are locked down on top of that. So what happens after lockdown? So a lot of people went to spend the money. They made sure that but now here's the thing. When they get to the shops, the prices of goods and services were high. Why? Why was prices of goods and services were high at that time? This shows you that, the inflation, the more they increase interest rate, the inflation will also rise, right? So now it gets difficult for people to borrow money from the banks because interest rates are just up. So now the same 1,000 rand that you used to buy you enough grocery, now it's no longer buying enough grocery anymore, right? So this is actually the right time for you to start a side hustle. To find out more about 2023 side hustles that you can actually do this year, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you next time.